Bernie Sanders, welcome to 7:30.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Tell me, how did America, the land of the free, become the land of crushing inequality?
Well, there are a lot of factors for that. I think what we have seen in the last 40 or 50 years is a very concerted effort on the part of the 1% in corporate America to make sure that governmental policy works to benefit them and disadvantages ordinary Americans. And the result of it is that right now we have more income and wealth inequality than we've ever had in the history of this country. People on top doing phenomenally well, working families really struggling.
In your book, as in your two presidential campaigns, you say that millions of Americans responded to your central message about what you call the evils of unfettered capitalism. And yet many more Americans turn to the most garish example of that capitalist excess, Donald Trump. Why do you think they did that?
Well, I think, Sarah, that's a great question. It's an important question. And I want the people of Australia to understand it's not because everybody who votes for Trump is a racist or a sexist or a homophobe. That is not the case. I think what you're seeing is that millions of people are hurting. They're suffering. They're working for inadequate wages. In America, our healthcare system is a disaster. Can't afford to send their kids to college. Housing costs are off the chart. And they're looking at the government. They're looking at what Democrats have done for years, and not much has happened to improve their lives. They are hurting, and they're wondering whether anybody hears them. And not only in the United States, but all over the world, you're seeing demagogic type of characters like Trump saying, hey, forget about really democracy. I'm going to take on everybody. I'm going to represent your interests. Vote for me. And in America and around the world, that type of appeal is having success among working people. And the antidote to that is to actually have a government that protects the interests of working families and is prepared to take on powerful special interests.
How much do you think that senior people in the Democratic Party, who you've been working with for a long time, how much do they understand that it was their party, the Democratic Party, that in many ways betrayed working Americans?
Some do, many do not. And I fear very much that too many Democratic leaders have kind of given up on the working class of this country. And the pity of it is, as I'm sure you know, that traditionally from Franklin Delano Roosevelt on, the party of the working class in this country was the Democratic Party. But we're seeing that dissipate every single day. And certainly one of my missions now is to create an agenda and a platform for Democrats to take on powerful special interests and to improve lives for ordinary Americans. And that means guaranteeing health care to all as a human right, not a radical idea around the world, but certainly in America, not the case. Demand that the wealthy start paying their fair share of taxes, making sure that young people can go to college without leaving school deeply in debt, creating jobs by addressing the crisis of climate change. So many things that we can do, but unfortunately, we're not doing it.
We know that wages have stagnated in an extraordinary way in the United States. But hasn't the US story, in a way, always been about inequality? A country whose historical wealth is derived from slavery, where workers' rights were suppressed, where health problems can impoverish a family. What's new in the story?
I think what's new about it, Sarah, is the extreme level to which that exists right now. It is absolutely true that we've always had inequality in America, but you have not had a situation where three people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. You've not had a situation where three Wall Street firms are the major shareholders in 95% of the major corporations in America. You haven't. So you're seeing concentration of wealth and power. And I'll tell you what else you're seeing. And I don't know how many Australians are familiar with the American political system, which is a pretty corrupt system. So if you wanted to become an American citizen and you were a billionaire, you can start what is called a super PAC. You could spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars supporting candidates or trying to defeat candidates. So you have an increasingly corrupt political system as a result, among other things, of a very bad Supreme Court decision called Citizens United. Add all of that together, The power is with the rich, with the 1%. Working families are struggling.
And just to explain to our audience, that decision, Citizens United, essentially equated money in politics, donations, with free speech. Has the US political system recovered from that decision?
Oh, no, no, it has deteriorated very substantially. And the result is that in every election, the people on top are spending more and more money to elect the candidates they want to see win and to defeat their opponents. So what you are seeing is a political system which is increasingly controlled by billionaires. And that is true in both political parties, by the way.
Are you surprised that Donald Trump's appeal to those blue-collar Democrats that you were just talking about has survived into a second run?
No, I'm not. I really am not surprised. There is a lot of discontent in America among working families. Uh, as you mentioned earlier, in terms of the stagnation of wages, do you know that over the last 50 years, think about all of the increase in worker productivity. Think about all of the explosions in technology. Do you know the average American worker today, his or her wages are lower than they were 50 years ago? And parents are worried about their kids who might have a lower standard of living than they do. So people are feeling that government does not listen, does not understand their pain, listen to their issues, and they are turning to somebody who says, forget all of that. I've got the answer. Don't worry about democracy. I'll take care of it for you. He's a phony. He's a pathological liar. But I'm afraid his appeal is working for many Americans.
What's at stake for America if Donald Trump wins the presidency?
Everything is at stake. I mean, right now, not only in our country, but in Europe, around the world, Latin America, there are struggles about whether or not nations will remain democratic or move toward oligarchy, move toward autocracy. And certainly if the United States moves in an authoritarian way, it will certainly send a signal to every country on earth that that's the future of politics in this world.
And what do you fear most from a Donald Trump presidency?
The destruction of democracy, the destruction of civil liberties, increased violence. Those are some of the things I worry about.
And how would he do that?
Well, we're already seeing the way that it is done. You don't wipe out democracy. You don't announce tomorrow that there will be no more elections. What you simply do is make it hard for your opponents to participate in the political process. So it's not very hard, given American politics and the way we do it here, to figure out how you make it harder for people of color, who often vote Democratic, not to be able to vote, young people not to be able to vote, people with disabilities not to be able to vote. You make it easier for big money to buy elections. You make sure that the media, which is significantly corporately controlled now, becomes even worse. You threaten the media with reporting on issues that the administration is uncomfortable with. That's some of the things that you do.
Do you expect him to be a vindictive president?
Very much so. So I think everything being equal, I mean, who can predict, but everything being equal, I think the fact that he has been indicted, as you know, on many, many counts, he's in court as we speak right now. I think he is very bitter. And I think he has made it very clear that he is going to respond accordingly to his political opponents.
You blame corporate media for supporting the inequality in the United States, singling out Rupert Murdoch in particular. Now, Murdoch has always argued that his newspaper and television gives the common person what they want, and that to argue otherwise is elitist.
Rupert Murdoch's TV stations and newspapers around the world do very, very well. But I don't know, it is a chicken and an egg. It's not giving people what they want. It is also producing products that appeal to certain instincts in people, which, they respond to. I think Murdoch and his media empire played a disastrous role in so many areas, including the whole issue of climate change.
Given what you say about the risks of this election, should Joe Biden have stood aside for a younger candidate?
No, I think I don't want to speculate about the what ifs or what should have happened. Biden is the candidate. Now, our job is to bring uh, various coalitions, people who have concerns about Biden, but to make it very clear that A, Biden has done some good things, and I don't think he has fully gotten the credit for some of the things that he has done. For example, he is, as best I understand, the only president in American history to actually stand on a picket line with workers. He has recently said that he would urge unorganized workers in the automobile industry to join a union. No other president in American history has said that. We have done more on the dealing with creating policies to move us to sustainable energy than any time. We're rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. He has done as best he can trying to protect women's rights to control their own bodies and gay rights as well. So I think he's not getting the credit for what he has done. But clearly, what we have got to make clear to ordinary Americans is you may not like everything that Biden has done. Maybe you think he's too old. Maybe you disagree with him on Gaza or this, that, and the other thing. But you know what? The alternative is a hell of a lot worse.
Without you in the race this time, are your progressive ideas that were able to influence Joe Biden's 2020 campaign still as influential?
Well, that's a good question. And I will tell you, we're doing our best to make sure that they will be influential. Biden is not going to win if young people do not vote in large numbers, if working class people do not support him. And I think it makes sense to him. I know it does make sense to him, and I hope his advisors to understand they're going to have to not only defend what they have done over the last years, but also come up with an agenda. People want to hear, what are you going to do if you're reelected? What is your plan? And the truth is, the progressive agenda is an enormously popular agenda. This is not a fringe agenda. This is what working class people want to see. Now, again, around the rest of the world, among wealthier countries like Australia, healthcare is a human right, right?
Yeah.
You know, in my country, you have 85 million Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. We're probably spending twice as much per capita on healthcare as you do in Australia. Cost of prescription drugs off the charts. And what the American people want to know is Biden going to have the courage to take on the healthcare industry, take on the pharmaceutical industry? Is he going to raise wages, the minimum wage in this country, to a living wage? Are we going to build the housing that we need to build? I think he needs an agenda to appeal to young people, working class people, and say, you know what, vote for me, give me a Democratic majority in the House and the Senate, we're going to improve your lives.
We're now into the election year proper. Is Joe Biden giving your supporters enough reason to turn out to vote?
He's going to have to do a lot better. We're working with, to be honest with you, we are working with the administration on that.
Given they've had 4 years to consolidate their power, how open are they to your involvement?
Well, I think they understand this is not an intellectual discourse. This is basic politics. Do you want to win? And I'm assuming that they want to win. And if you want to win, you're going to need working class support to a far greater degree than they have it right now. And working class people support the progressive agenda. You're surely going to need young people. You're going to need people of color who support our agenda. So I think forget whether you agree with everything we're standing for. If you want to win the election, you're going to have to work with the progressive movement.
And are you still able to speak to President Biden?
Yes.
And how does he respond to your arguments? You're a far more progressive politician than he's ever been.
Look, he is as you indicate, he is a more progressive president than he has been, than he was as a senator, for example. I worked as chairman of the Budget Committee in the Senate with him on what we call the American Rescue Plan, which was a $1.9 trillion bill that really went a long way to help us get our economy back on track as a result of COVID, and also moved us forward on public health. He was there. He was there for that bill. He was there for other legislation called Build Back Better, which really would have begun in a systemic way to transform America. Unfortunately, we didn't get we lacked 2 votes to pass that, but he was there for that.
There were a huge number of young people involved in your presidential campaigns. Is it a strength or a weakness in America that there are so many older people in positions of power?
I think, you would want to see our government be reflective of what the population is about. We have made progress in recent years in terms of more blacks in positions of power, more women certainly in positions of power. It is not unusual now for people openly gay to have positions of power. But I think we still have a long way to go to bring young people into the political process. Although, even in that regard, I would say that in the House of Representatives, there are dozens and dozens of really strong, progressive young people, people under 40 who are doing a great job. And I think sometimes we don't pay as much attention to that reality as we should. Sarah, I think I'm going to have to get off in a minute here.
Okay, let me just ask a question about you. As a student, you opposed the war in Vietnam. You've been opposed to wars in Iraq, in Yemen, and you're opposed to war with Iran. Do you continue to support Israel's war in Gaza?
Well, I certainly believe that Israel has the right to defend itself from the barbaric terrorist attack that Hamas perpetrated on October 7th. But I am very disturbed by the disproportionate response of the Israeli military, which is causing a almost unprecedented humanitarian disaster in Gaza right now. I mean, we're talking about 22,000 people have been killed, 2/3 of them women and children, 70% of the homes there, the housing units damaged or destroyed. You're talking about, as we speak, starvation taking place because Israeli efforts to limit humanitarian aid. So I am working, helping to lead the effort to make sure that Israel changes those policies and that the United States makes it clear to Israel we're not going to provide them with money to continue this barbaric military campaign.
This is a strange position for you to be in, isn't it? Because the left in the US wants a permanent ceasefire and you don't. That puts you to the right of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. Have you found this difficult to navigate?
I am comfortable in where I am in saying that at the end of the day, what really matters is, does the United States continue to provide unlimited and unconditional financial aid to Israel to continue this humanitarian disaster? That's the role that I'm playing. I'm comfortable with that role.
Your policies clearly influence the Democratic Party. But as you contemplate retirement now, do you think that you changed America as well?
I think what our campaigns, and it's not just me, we had, God knows, people all over the country, grassroots activists and organizations who made it clear to the establishment in this country that people, ordinary people, are not content with the status quo, that the status quo is working very well for the rich and the powerful, not for them. And what we also showed, that there are tens of millions of people who want progressive change in America, to understand that economic rights are human rights, that we want to end all forms of bigotry, and we want to move aggressively dealing with income and wealth inequality. That is what we achieved. That's an important achievement.
Do you think that the young Bernie Sanders, who moved to the University of Chicago to take part in the civil rights movement, do you think that you've lived up to the promise of that generation?
I think we could all do better, and some of us are continuing to try to do better. But thank you very much, Sarah.
Bernie Sanders, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
My pleasure.